Dear students, a hearty welcome to the Department of English, Pioneer College, Pioneer. The students of Kannur University for their third semester Common Course English study the textbook Discoursing Diversities, Readings on Democracy and Secularism. And in the first module of the text, we have Ambedkar's concluding speech in the Constituent Assembly. The assembly, which was formed in 1946, which had its first meeting on the 9th of December 1946, spanned for almost 3 years. And in the concluding session of that parliament, the first parliament of India, it later became, Dr. Ambedkar, he being the chairman of the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution, makes a very powerful speech. It was delivered on the 25th of November 1949. Here, Ambedkar's speech, though given as one speech at one stretch, has an internal division in two parts. The first part is for internal assessment. The second part is for end semester examination. We shall have a very quick run through the first part, and we shall have a thorough reading of the second part. See, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was nominated to this Constituent Assembly to look into the matters of scheduled caste. But once he became a member, he was elected unanimously as the chairman of the drafting committee, and it was his duty to present it before the parliament, the later parliament, the first parliament of India. And he says it took almost 3 years, exactly 2 years, 11 months and 7 days since it first met on 9th of December 1946. And during this period, the Constituent Assembly had held 11 sessions. Out of these 11, 6 were spent in passing objectives, resolution, and the consideration of the reports of committees on fundamental rights, on union powers, on provincial constitution, on minorities, and on the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th sessions were devoted to the consideration of the draft constitution. These 11 sessions of the Constituent Assembly have consumed 165 days. Out of these, the Assembly spent 114 days for the consideration for the draft constitution. In the first part of his speech, we can see a parliamentarian, an orator, a politician justifying his ways. To begin with, how to begin a good speech? One has to begin from the beginning. He says, we had taken time, almost 3 years, to draft a constitution for India, because it was not a very easy task. They had gone through more than 60 constitutions of different nations. And as we are aware, democracy, secularism, these two terms were new as far as Indians were considered. The American War of Independence and also the French Revolution, of course, had influenced us, like people of all other parts of the world. And it took more than 150 years to reach democracy in India because of so many reasons. And he says this constitution is fine-tuned by the committee because of the help of so many people. And there was a kind of criticism against the members, especially the chairman, for taking too long a time to finish its work, and also going on leisurely and wasting public money. It was said to be the case of Nero fiddling while Rome was burning. Means Indians were fighting for freedom, and the members of this committee were wasting time was the first criticism that was leveled against Ambedkar and his team, and he had to answer in the assembly, in the parliament. He had to answer to the criticism leveled against him, and he elaborates on that, what they had done. So many drafts have been made, so many amendments have been made, so many sittings were made, and in a democratic setup like that, there should be such things happening, he says. The quality of the draft also was criticized. Mr. Nizamuddin Ahmad criticized him. He said it took a very long time, and also it was not fruitful. He says the drafting committee was a drifting committee. The Indian constitution is not up to the mark when we compare it with that of other nations. That was a criticism. And he says that Mr. Nasaruddin Ahmad was mistaken because he would have been selected as the chairman had he been having that quality and capacity to draft a constitution like this. And it was pointless, he says, to argue that there was no merit for this Indian constitution. He said, I am here, Ambedkar says, only to safeguard the interests of the scheduled castes, but I have been selected as a chairman because of the expertise that is expected from my part, and I think I have done to my level best. And he gives credit to people like B.N. Rao, S.N. Mukherjee, and so many other people, because it was not a single man's duty to draft a constitution like this. It was a combined effort, and nobody can find fault with a single person for that. No, the Indian constitution was first of all imagined by people like M.N. Roy, a communist. Later, Indian National Congress, they supported it. They took it as a mission. And it is because of the help of so many people, experts, that they could draft a constitution like this. It is very easy to criticize people. And he finally thanks Mr. President, Mr. Rajendra Prasad, for giving all the support for drafting and presenting it before the Constituent Assembly. And two more people criticized Ambedkar for two things. The Communist Party was criticizing because they were standing for the dictatorship of the proletariat. which would not happen in a democratic setup. The Socialist Party, they also criticized because they actually wanted to nationalize or socialize all private property all on a sudden. That won't happen. So one has to have two-third majority in the parliament, and we can make amendments. This is not the final draft. Of course, if you have two-third majority in the parliament in the independent India, he is speaking on the eve of the independence. Means independence was achieved, but India was about to become the republic. In 1946 they began, and in 1947, of course, in August 27, 29, they had a session, and after independence, when India became a republic in 1950, August 26, they were sitting once again just before the Republic Day. On 24th, they were sitting again, and there were so many amendments made, and people who condemn, who criticize the Indian Constitution, its draft, should be aware of the long process that was there in the making of the Indian Constitution. So, as Jefferson, the American statesman, said, we may consider each generation as a distinct nation. We cannot make an Indian Constitution for all generations to come. Every generation is a new nation, so we have to leave some scope, room for amendments. And he welcomes all the detractors, critiques, by saying that anything and everything can be done for improving the quality of the Constitution. If we are able to obtain a two-third majority, see, one can make amendments in the parliaments. See, there was another criticism against this draft. That is, much of centralization, and that the states have been reduced to municipalities. As in the days of kingship, there were emperors and monarchs and also subordinate kings. Just like that, the central government has got supreme power, and the state governments do not have that much power. It's against federal principles, they argued. And he says, it may be that the residuary powers are given to the center and not to the states. There are three pillars, in the chief mark of federalism, he says, lies in the partition of legislative, executive, and judiciary. And we have all these three systems working together. So the central government cannot do much harm to the states. But during certain emergency situations, central government has to use their power, he says. The second charge was that during emergency period, they will be overriding the states. Of course, there is a danger, but there are, we can say, executive, judiciary, and such things. So, in the next election, if we get majority, the ruling party will be giving way to another party. So, the emergency must be addressed, he says, for the common end. It is only the center which can work for a common end. No state can do it. And this is the first part of his speech. In the second part, he says, I could have ended here, but I have some apprehensions. I have some tensions, some fears in my mind. whether the acquired freedom, we fought and got freedom for India, but whether we will be able to retain, whether we will be able to maintain the freedom that we have achieved by a long fight. On 26th January 1950, India will be an independent country, he says, and people cheers. No? In the parliament, you can see he is speaking and people support him. What would happen to her independence? Will she maintain her independence or will she lose it again? India had in its past some forms of democracy practiced, and there are historical evidences. If you read Buddhist Bhikshu Sanghas and their records, they disclose that not only there were parliaments, for the Sanghas were nothing but parliaments, for the Sanghas knew the parliamentary procedure known to the modern times. India had a much developed type of a democratic system. Even when there was monarchy, there was election as well. There was never absolute monarchy here. So he says the point is that she once had independence and she had lost it. It is very sad. Will she lose it again for a second time? Because he cites example from history from the 1st century to the 19th century. She lost independence by the infidelity and treachery of some of her own people. In the invasion of Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim, the military commanders of King Dahar accepted bribes from the agents of Muhammad bin Qasim and refused to fight on the side of their king. There are examples in the 1st century itself. See, the Saudi Arabia, they came to India, the rulers came to India, and the Indian rulers were not united. They took sides with the people who had come from the outside. And it was Jaichand who invited Muhammad Ghori later, the 11th century, to invade India and fight against Prithviraj, and promised him to help himself and the Solanki kings. Again, in the days of Shivaji, he has given example. Maratha noblemen and the king were fighting the battle on the side of Mughal emperors against Shivaji. So in India, there was division. People were not united. So when the British were trying to destroy the Sikh rulers, their principal commander sat silent and did not save the Sikh. In 1857, when a large part of India had declared a war of independence against the British, the Sikhs stood and watched the event as silent spectators. That means there was no unity in India among the Hindus and the Muslims and the Sikhs and Parsis and the different religious sects. So this should not happen. Now we are independent. India is independent. India is going to be a republic. And so it is our responsibility to safeguard our freedom. Nobody else from the outside will help us, or we can never find fault with others. And Ambedkar shares his anxiety. He asks, will history repeat itself? It is this thought which fills me with anxiety, he says. This anxiety is deepened by the realization of the fact that in addition to our old enemies, the form of castes and creeds, we are going to have many political parties with the diverse opposing political creeds. See, there is only one national party in India when uh, our Indian constitution was in its drafting condition, Indian National Congress. And so many parties have begun to emerge, having different orientations, different ideas based upon caste and creed. This should not happen, he says. Caste is to be addressed, caste is to be eradicated, but there should not be any party based upon caste and creed and color. Will Indians place the country above their creed, or will they place creed above the country is the question. Indians are not Aryans or Dravidians or North Indians or South Indians. No, there should not be that kind of a compartmentalization, he says. There should be only one India. And if only we stand in union, we can survive the situation, he says. On the 26th of January 1950, India would be a democratic country, he says, in the sense that India from that day would have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The same thought comes to my mind. What would happen to her democratic constitution? See, will she be able to maintain it, or will she lose it again? From the history, we have to learn some lessons. This is the second thought that comes to my mind and makes me anxious as the first. See, it is not that India did not know what democracy is. There was democracy in India. Republics were there in India. See, where there were monarchies, they were either elected or limited monarchies. They were never absolute monarchies. Absolute despotism was never there in India. Kings and emperors were under the control of the mandate of people. It is not that India did not know parliament or parliamentary procedures. A study of the Buddhist Bhikshu Sanghas, he says, were nothing but parliaments. For the Sanghas knew the parliamentary procedure known to the modern people, modern times. There was much democracy among the Buddhists. They had rules of parliamentary procedure known to we people now. They had rules regarding seating arrangements as in the parliament now, rules regarding motions, resolutions, quorum, whip, counting of votes, voting by ballot, censure motion, regularization, etc. Although these rules of parliamentary procedure were applied by the Buddha to the meeting of the Sanghas, he must have borrowed them from the rules and political assemblies functioning in the country of his time. So in the distant past, even before the Europeans could imagine democracy, in India there was such a practice. So we should have to think about it. This democracy in India, this system is lost in India. It was lost in India, and will she lose it again is the recurring question that he asks in his final speech in the Constituent Assembly. See, if there is a landslide, if there is an overwhelming victory, electoral victory in election, some party having majority in the parliament will be becoming dictators. There will be dictatorship in the parliament of one majoritarian party. This should not happen. The majority should have to think about the minority as well. And there is a danger, he says, if one party has got supreme power in the parliament, they will have to listen to the voice of the feeble, the weaker section, the minority. If we wish to maintain democracy, not merely in form but also in fact, what we must do, he asks. First thing, in my judgment, we must do is to hold fast to constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. India has so many economic objectives, social objectives. There should not be any kind of caste hierarchies, caste discriminations. In the economic field, there should be equal distribution of wealth. There should not be the poor and the rich and the gap between the two great. So we have to bridge the gap. It means that we must abandon the method of civil disobedience, non-cooperation and the satyagraha. Now, this is his take on Gandhi's way of uh, responding to the British rule in India. We had conducted satyagrahas, we had non-cooperative movements, we had civil disobedience movements in the days of the British. Now we are ruling ourselves. We should never do these kinds of revolutionary methods now. We should always use constitutional methods. If you have two-third majority in the parliament, you can pass any bill. Any law can be made. So this should not happen. But where the constitutional methods are open, there can be no justification for these unconstitutional methods. We have our parliament, elected representatives, debating forums, we can discuss. Everything can be done. And we should shy away from these kinds of things. These methods are nothing but the grammar of anarchy. We should never follow it. And the sooner they are abandoned, the better for us, he says. British people were there, suppressing us, overriding us, but the condition has changed. The second thing he says we must do is to observe the caution which John Stuart Mill has given to us all. Means we should never lay our liberty in the feet of a great man or to trust him with powers which enable him to subvert their institutions. So many leaders would be there. We will be fans of great leaders, but we should never surrender our everything, our thought, our willpower, our brain to any man. We should never permit any great man to intervene and subvert our institutions. We have parliament, two houses of the parliament, we have judiciary, so many other systems. We should not be after great men. We should be after people, the masses, the group. There should be a group discussion, a thought that is shared among people. We should never surrender before a great man, whoever he is. There is nothing wrong in being grateful to great people. Some people must have rendered lifelong services to our nation. But that is for our nation. But for the coming generation, we should never think of them as leaders for all ages. As has been well said by the Irish patriot. See, no man can be grateful at the cost of his honor, and no nation can be grateful at the cost of its liberty. We should be free. At the cost of its liberty, we can never surrender our ideas before any great person. Hero worship, he says, for India. Bhakti, or what may be called the path of devotion or hero worship. In India, there was such a tradition. There is a tendency among people to worship heroes. We have bhakti in politics as well. Hero worship in politics is a sure road to degradation, he says, to eventual dictatorship. If we worship a single man as a hero, he will become a dictator. And he cautions against it in his speech. The third thing that disturbs him is that we should not be content, satisfied with mere political democracy. Democracy is not simply electing our leaders or passing bills in the parliament. No, we must make our political democracy a social democracy as well. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at its base social democracy. What does social democracy mean? He explains. It means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity. And he defines all these things. as the principles of life. See, liberty, he says, political freedom should be there. More than that, he says, there should be equality. He says, one of these is inequality in India. Equality without liberty would kill individual initiative. Without equality, liberty would produce the supremacy of a few over the many. Political liberty and freedom does not guarantee equality. Some people will be equal, some others will be more equal. In that sense, he says, there should be equality and also fraternity. Different sects of people, different groups of people in the name of caste and religion. We have different caste communities in India. There should not be such kind of compartmentalizations. There should be a kind of fraternity among all these religious groups. On the economic plane, he says, we have a society in which there are some people who are immensely rich and some others are very, very poor. This should not happen. We are going to enter into a life of contradictions then. In the economic field, in the social field, there are contradictions, there are hierarchies, there are imbalances. Such things should not happen. The poor and the rich, the upper caste and the lower caste, the lowered caste, all those people should see that justice is done to them. Means the people who are in power should see that justice is done to all people alike in all walks of life. So liberty, equality and fraternity are the 3 points he focuses towards the end of his speech. Economic life is very much significant. There should be equality, and in caste also there should be equality. One should never think that one's caste is supreme or superior to another person's caste. So he says, next he says, we are wanting a recognition of the principle of fraternity. There should not be any kind of narrow mindedness in the case of what we can say religious life. In our religious life, each and every religion has got its own merits, and so we have to pay respect to others, he says. See, he gives examples from America and other areas of the world where there are religious fundamentalism at work. And that should not happen in India, he says. There was so little solidarity in the USA, he says, at the time when this incident occurred, that the people of America did not think that they were a nation. See, he says about Christianity in America. In the American Commonwealth, they were thinking about not about the people, but about our nation, their nation. So he says a nation should always think about its people. Means there should not be any kind of unity alone in diversity. We should think about diversities, discourses of diversities, and not about unity alone. When we think about unity and one nation, there will be suppression of the voices of some people. So the Indian nation should always think about the people of India. So this kind of a misleading situation should not happen here as in America, he says. And India, there are castes, and he says the castes are anti-national. People who think themselves as superior caste, they are anti-national. For the retaining of our freedom in India that we have achieved, there should not be any caste discrimination in India. So he repeats that fraternity can be a fact only when there is a nation Without fraternity, equality, and liberty, there will be no deeper, uh, yeah, kind of a democracy practiced in India. So, if India has to remain democratic, socialist republic, we have to uh, maintain these kinds of fraternity, liberty, and equality, that kind of a slogan. These are my reflections, Jesus, towards the end of the speech about the tasks that lie ahead of us. See, they may not be very pleasant to some, but there can be no gainsaying that political power in this country has too long been the monopoly of a few. India was monopolized by people who are in the higher strata of the society. Political freedom should come to the grassroots level. Now we have the three-tier system in India, Grama Panchayat, where we even reservation is there for women. And only if we practice these kinds of decentralization of power, we can survive. These downtrodden people, downtrodden classes are tired of being governed. In India, the poor people, the people of the lower rung, they have been overruled by the majority, the upper caste people. So, lower caste people should be given justice. As Abraham Lincoln stood for the blacks in America, we have to stand for the Dalits and the underprivileged people of India. There should be equality and fraternity in all spheres of life, all walks of life, he says. And he says he did not want to actually tire the whole parliament or the constituent assembly with his long speech. He concludes, he says that independence is no doubt a matter of joy. It is not merely a matter of joy. Of course, there is something to be enjoyed and celebrated. But let us not forget that this independence has thrown us on great responsibilities. We have to shoulder the responsibility of maintaining the democracy that is now in practice in India, at least in written form. We have a well-written constitution. By independence, we have lost the excuses of blaming the British for anything going wrong. We have been blaming the British for everything. Now we can't do it. We are independent Indians. So we have to think twice before we practice. So he concludes his speech by saying that we are prepared to have the government for the people and by the people and of the people. If we wish to preserve the constitution in which we have sought to enshrine the principles of government of the people, for the people and by the people, let us resolve not to be tardy in the recognition of the evils that lie across our path and which induce people to prefer the government for the people to the government by the people, not to weak in our initiative to remove them. That is the only way to serve the country I know of no better. He concludes his speech by saying that we have to think about people, not about men, great men, leaders alone. We should never think about one caste, one religion. There are multiplicity of manifestations of human life in this world. In the case of caste, color, creed, gender, region, there are only differences, and we are discussing the diversities. India lies in its diversities. When we speak about unity in diversity, we overlook the case of diversities. We always think about unity alone. And yes, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar stands for diversities. We have to take into consideration the lives of different people of India. Then only we can maintain and retain democracy in India. Thank you. Now, let us discuss the questions and the answers. Question number 1. Which democratic tradition is mentioned in the speech? The democratic tradition of ancient Buddhist Bhikshu Sanghas is mentioned in the speech. Many rules of parliamentary procedure were applied by the Buddha in the Sangh meetings, which he must have borrowed from the rules of the political assemblies functioning in the country in his time. Question number 2. How did India lose its freedom first? India lost its freedom first due to the infidelity and treachery of some of her own people, like the military commanders of King Dahar, Jaichand, etc. Question number 3. What was inherently wrong with Indian society with regard to equality? In India, there is discrimination in the social and economic planes. The caste-based difference that is prevailing in India even now is a central problem, and it denies equality for all. Question number 4. How does caste become anti-national? The castes are anti-national because they bring about separation in social life. Castes also generate jealousy and antipathy between caste and caste. Question number 5. What will be the consequence of hero worship? In politics, bhakti or hero worship is a road to degradation and to eventual dictatorship. Last question. What is John Stuart Mill's observation of gratefulness to great men? J.S. Mill has stressed the importance of maintaining democracy. He has cautioned not to lay one's liberties at the feet of even a great man. He has also warned not to trust great men with power, which enable them to subvert the institutions. Thank you very much.